Hey folks, welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. It's time for the first fall-winter garden tour. Let's go take a look. Yeah, garden tours, I don't understand it, but when somebody posts a garden tour, it becomes wildly popular. And among my videos, garden tours seem to be really popular with folks. I don't know why, just taking a look around a garden. I guess it's fun to watch people grow and watch the things they plant and see all the how-tos come to fruition. A lot of people often ask me, well, hey, how did that work? Or how did that experiment go? Frequently you'll find the answer in in garden tour videos, because I'll stop and show you a plant or show you a crop and say, this is the crop that we did the experiment with the fertilizer with, for example, the okra from last summer. So yeah, garden tours. Let's go take a look and see what's going on. All right, let's start our tour with my small bed here. You can see the radishes are doing fine. They're a little beat down because of the dew and they got watered yesterday. But yeah, look at that. Getting their true leaves there, starting to stand up tall. And looking forward to having some radishes. My pepper plant here is putting on some fruit. This is a habanada, which means it's a habanero pepper with no heat. I've got a couple of lettuce plants plugged in here, some romaine. And then my little jalapeno here is putting on a lot of fruit. Smaller fruit. You usually get smaller fruit on peppers in the winter. And but there's a lot of it there. I've got a couple here, a couple over here, that one and that one, 4 or 5 of them in here, and one over there. So yeah, that's one of them we pruned to be more branchy, and it didn't survive very well in this soil, and didn't grow very fast. As you can see, these are rather small because that for the longest time was pretty poor soil. But I've added some compost there and everything seems to have really responded to compost really well. Some potted peppers here, and you can see that their leaves are kind of small and everything is close together because the growth on these peppers has been slow. Again, the pots they're in have not really been cared for much. My potted peppers are usually kind of on their own, but you can see I put compost on top of all of these pepper plants and they've really responded well, and you can see tons and tons of little blossoms coming on. And so I expect maybe to see some peppers. We're going to get a cold snap though, and that might give these peppers a hard time. Now there's some tree inside this pepper. There's a couple of refugee peppers that I plugged into a cloth pot. This guy right here is my garden salsa pepper. This is going on, once we hit the spring next year, this will be 3 years old. And I've trimmed it back several times, and you can see the stem down there is very woody. That's a good pepper, a good producer. Here I've got some rosemary. I believe in fresh herbs in the garden when you can, and so this stuff makes me happy. I like to come and just smell the stuff. It's such a wonderful plant, and that takes very little care. In fact, it doesn't like a lot of water. It's an arid plant, so I don't really water it much. I just let whatever rain is gonna fall on it to fall on it, and every now and then if it looks a little dry, I'll throw the water hose up there for just a second. More peppers here and there. I did cut my basil back. My basil was about, oh, it was about 3 feet tall, and you can see it's starting to want to bolt and put on these flower heads. We'll just pick those off. I thought I cut it all back, but I cut it down to almost wooden stems, and basil will start pushing out new growth from these stems. So that's a good one to have. But once it starts bolting and putting on flowers, basil gets kind of skunky tasting and smelling. It's no good. So yeah, basil, gotta have some. My Brussels sprouts are, you know, kind of so-so. I've got a couple of plants that look good. That one right there. That one in the middle doesn't look so good. That one's doing well. But that one there and that one there are not looking as good. I expect them to catch up. That's a cabbage I plugged in because the Brussels sprout that was there earlier actually died. It looked kind of like that. But then something cut it off. I think it was a cutworm. But all this is radishes, different kinds of radishes growing in between. Over here my perpetual spinach is coming up. And perpetual spinach, though there's a spot right there that doesn't have any sprouts in it, This stuff will fill out this area quite nicely. Perpetual spinach is a Swiss chard, and it can grow quite vigorously. Here I've got some carrots coming up, and we can see that all the carrots in this area are in fact coming up, so that makes me happy. Over here I had planted some you know, I don't remember what I put in here, and I didn't label it. I'll have to go back and look. So I'm going to put this whole thing in there because these seeds are 5 years old. I don't know how the germination rate's going to be on these, but we'll find out. But no worry, it's not coming up. That was older seed. I remember that it was older seed and it was an afterthought. So we're going to re-sow this area with something else, or maybe I'll plug in some more cabbages. I've got a few more plants. In fact, I think that's what I'll do. We'll just fold this up, and right here I'll put in some more plants. That's kale. That's for my son's chicken, because chickens, I don't care for kale, but for the sake of growing some eggs, I'll take him some kale. Middle bed has cabbages. These are all Bonnie plants here, and they're looking really good. That one there looks really good. But yeah, I gotta have cabbages. Cabbages are a wonderful addition to a garden. Right along this strip here, I might plant some things, because these are going to take a while to use up all that space. And believe me, they will use up all this space here. But I might put some onions down the middle. Got some beets coming up over here, going to need to thin them. I might just let them push one another apart. That's what beets will do. But yeah, there's a little clump here and there. This is generally what happens if you sow your seed in the broadcast method and then rake them in. You're going to have uneven spreads here, and that's just life. So if you don't like it, then don't do it that way. Here I've come in with a stirrup hoe and taken out some weeds. These are carrots here, most of it. There's some purslane weeds growing in here. That guy right there is purslane, and that's a tomato. So there are weeds in here. Once these carrots get a little larger, I've planted them just close enough in rows that I can get my stirrup hoe right between the rows and dislodge all those weeds. Peas are coming up. I did stirrup hoe in between the rows to knock back some of the weeds, and you can see dead weeds like that tomato plant laying on the surface there. A stirrup hoe is really handy, and all it is a loop like this. Looks like a horse stirrup, and this portion rocks back and forth, and the blade cuts just under the surface, so it goes just under the surface of the soil, cutting the roots and just leaving them in place. It's a very handy tool, but you have to plan ahead. You need your crops to be at least that far apart. Stirrup hoe is a wonderful tool when you have rows like this. You can just go in between and cut down your weeds with that stirrup right and just below the surface of the soil. There's a citrus that was in my question and answer this week. But yeah, the peas are looking good. I really like peas. I'm going to have to trellis some of these, I'm pretty sure. So we may thin them down and put some string trellises across. This is my spinach over here, and it's not coming up as consistently as I hoped. It was kind of old seed. I've got some good germination in the first row here. Not good germination in the second row. And not really good germination anywhere else. And I've got a bunch of purslane coming in. Purslane will, you know, it's a superfood, but it's also a weed when you don't want it in your garden. And this stuff grows crazy in this garden. You cut that purslane and leave it laying around, it'll just re-root. So what I might do is just take this whole section and plant it in lettuce, except for this row of spinach. So I might just pull all this out, stirrup hoe the whole thing, rake off the weeds, and put some lettuce in there. We'll see. I've got plenty of lettuce. A tray of lettuce, I've got 6 different varieties growing, and you can see the varieties grow at different rates. And there are even some weeds coming up in here because this is compost that they're growing in. That's chickweed. But yeah, the lettuce is coming up really well. It's a little beat down also because I watered it. And I watered it yesterday. It was all laying flat, but you can see the leaves are starting to stand up again. And yeah, this is another week or two, and this will be ready to go in, and these plugs will be ready to plant. Look at that. As I was talking about the lettuce, I heard something going on over here, and Phoebe had eaten half of that fig. Can you imagine how frustrating it is to have low growing figs and a fig eating dog? No, don't eat my figs. Speaking of figs, all my fig plants on my deck over here are trying to get their last fruit ripened up. And you know, you can tell they're looking kind of scraggly because we had a false winter kind of, well, when the seasons begin to change, these figs, there's one that's ripe enough to attract ants. These figs start to drop their leaves and then they realize, oh, it's not really winter, and they start putting on fruit again. Normally this fruit doesn't have time to ripen. That one's probably ripe with the ants all over it. Let's see. That's pretty ripe. I'm gonna have to taste that, make sure there's no ants inside. What is this? This is a Smith. This is one of my favorite figs, actually. Let's try that. It's not bad. Not as sweet as it could be. And the reason it's not sweet, let me tell you. Because these pots are getting a little small for fig trees of this size. And therefore they've depleted most of the fertilization, most of the fertile soil in there. And if we pull those out, you'll notice that they're probably fairly root bound, even though some of these I've potted up this past spring. Well, if there's not enough fertilization and minerals in this soil, the fruit's not going to taste very good. So you really have to stay on top of fertilizing these fig plants. And well, sometimes that doesn't happen. Here's a big ripe one right here. It's getting there. It's not quite ripe enough. You can always tell a fig needs to be not firm on the stem. It needs to almost flop. And it needs to be so soft that you can almost squeeze it there. So that's not ready. I suspect a bird will get it before I do, unless I put something around it. These are tiger stripe figs. They're not going to make it. They're too firm. And, well, I've not had a good tiger stripe off of this plant yet because they fruit too late in the year. This is a white Cadota fig, and it's got a few that are starting to look like they're almost ripe. Did you find another fig? Phoebe, hey, where are you finding all those figs? Why don't you eat peppers or something, huh? Why don't you eat kale? That's what you should do. You should eat kale. Thumbs up for the grapevines. We had a good harvest this year, and they're starting to drop their leaves, and you can begin to see just how vigorous these plants are as they send out their vines and they start to intermingle. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this particular vine, let's see, I wouldn't be surprised if this comes from a whole nother plant than what ought to be growing here. But these vines, you can see they get pretty thick. These are 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old vines, and I can remove these supports if I want to. But I'm gonna have to tighten my wire this year, and that's gonna be a chore, but has to be done. But I can't trim all this stuff off and prune these vines until the fall, and you'll see how I do that. We come along here and trim it back so that every little vine is about that long on average. There's a method to the madness to tend to these vines. But once we do tend them, they look rather sad. But that's what you have to do to get a good crop. Small bed is filled with pak choi, bok choy. This is a Chinese green called yod fa. And over here we got some dill coming up, and it's all growing around this little pepper here. So we'll just see how that does through the winter. I'm gonna have to severely thin the bok choy over there. You see that it was old seed too, and I thought, well, if it's old seed, the germination rate won't be that good. Here's an example where the germination rate was probably 100%. It's okay. What I don't eat out of here will become compost, and we'll eat it that way. Did I catch you with another fig? Phoebe, you're eating another fig? Where did you get that? This fig tree is an ischia. I don't know if it's a green or a white ischia. Baker Creek sold me a tissue culture, I guess 6 years ago or more, and it was just called ischia. That tree has never fruited, and I've mentioned this tree before, and I've mentioned how it was on its last year because it's under this shade, and I believe that that's the problem. It grows beautifully and it fleshes out, and every now and then it puts on figlets, tiny little fig, but they never grow. So this tree has not borne any fruit at all. You can see here, it wants to bud, it wants to grow. So what I'm gonna do is take some cuttings off of this fig tree. I'll probably take some of those down there that will have some roots on them, the suckers. And then this fig tree is coming out soon. I keep threatening, but I'm closer and closer to making that threat reality. I'm going to cut it down, I'm going to dig into the ground, cut some of the roots out, and then I'm going to make biochar right there. These are my last remaining sweet potatoes, and they are in a bin. And I hope that they have grown under that bin and into the native ground. It looks like they have, and they've rooted along the way. And we'll see if we get any sweet potatoes out of there. I really like sweet potatoes. I'll be growing them again next summer. But what I want from this is some potatoes I can use as rootstock to make some slips next year. I really like the Murasaki and the O. Henry sweet potatoes that I've grown. I just didn't get many of them. I didn't get a lot of them because we had vermin to dig them up and eat them. So I'm hoping that there's some tubers down there that we can dig up and use for our seed for next year. That's the garden. That's what's happening. Not a whole lot. Winter gardens are notoriously slow, and so each garden update you'll just see a few more inches of growth at a time. And I look forward to the harvests, but those are mostly a long way off, with the exception of maybe the radishes. But even radishes grown in the winter seem to be much slower than radishes grown in the spring. So I'll keep updating you. I'll keep posting garden tours. I try to do a tour every month in the winter, and I'll fill in how-to videos and various topical videos in between. So there we go. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, I invite you to do so. It's really helpful and encouraging. If you like us, follow us on Instagram, even on Facebook, and happy gardening to you. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.